According to a YouGov study, young Americans are less wedded to the idea of monogamy than older Americans. The quote reads, nearly a fifth of under 30s have engaged in sexual activity with someone else with the knowledge of their partner. They asked the question, how would you react if your partner wanted to engage in sexual activities with someone else? And this graphic shows the results. Total overall, 68% of people would not be okay with it. And the average is around 19%, depends on the situation, 5% would be okay with it. But the cutoff they're pointing at is between 44 and 45. The young people younger than 45 have a 26 and 25% say it depends on the situation. And then older Americans are like, no, 74 and 78% would not be okay with it at all. The next question was about cheating. Have you ever engaged in sexual activities with someone else with or without the consent of your romantic partner? Now, these are the percentage of people who said yes and what qualifier they put on it. So total, 11% of people have done it with the consent of their partner, 19 without. But again, they're pointing at the cutoff. Without the consent of your partner, it's pretty standard. Yeah. It's around 20% of people. But there's a gap younger than 45 and older than 45, especially with the 65 and over. 3% say it's all right with the consent versus 17% under 45.
I have yet another theory on this.
Bring it.
Okay, so I am not in the camp of we're not at all monogamous, and I'm not in the camp of course we're monogamous. I'm in the camp of we're monogamous, we're set to be monogamous for about 4 years or so. And so that, because we are biologically driven to partner up to be able to have sex, have a kid, and raise a kid until he can run away from a lion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I read that study.
Yes, and that was me.
Really?
But I like to take credit for it. And so I think that we're now slowly getting there as a society because we have these different cultural norms, and we try so hard to stay within the cultural norms, like no sex before marriage, no sex before marriage, right? Now, back when we were getting married at 15, 16, that was a little bit more doable, right? Now, I got married at 38. That's not gonna work. Okay, so we're done with that cultural thing. That's just like saying, don't breathe till you're 38. Don't breathe, don't breathe, don't breathe, right? So now we're trying to stay in the marriage, right? And that's starting to get, burst at the seams. And maybe one way that you stay in the marriage and you stay with the kids, there's no lions, but we want to get them to college, right? Is you go, yeah, every once in a while, go ahead, right? And I think that's what people under 45 are starting to do.
Well, you've really put some thought into this. I admire you.
From lions.
I'm just thinking, if you look at the graph, when they talk about people, I think it was under 30 versus over 65, like under 30, you're still hot. You got a lot of opportunity to have sex outside of the marriage. When you hit 45 to 65, you ain't getting the same chances. Your numbers aren't as high because you just don't have it anymore. But at 28, you can leave the marriage and hook up and I'm not, obviously, I didn't put the thought into it that you did. I'm sitting back like sitting next to a scientist right here. And I don't know if your wife watches this show, but I really want to see that conversation.
I say, look, you have to understand, Alonzo called me a scientist. It's just science. It's just science, honey. That's all it is.
I feel like if over 65, I'll just be like, go do it. I don't care.
Yeah, it seems.
Just, you don't want this.
Yeah, I have a friend who has that theory. His cutoff is 55. After 55, what difference does it make? Go have at it, Hoss. Yeah. Right? He's saying to his wife, which is interesting.
A lot of senior women do not like Viagra because they're like, I thought I was done. Like, I'm tired of him, And they're like, no, don't take Viagra.
Right.
Go somewhere.
It's like getting hit out of bounds. It's like, I was out of bounds. Why'd you knock me over?
What do you think? Would you have if your boyfriend, let's just call it boyfriend, right, had started that conversation with you? Was that a conversation that would be fruitful or painful?
Well, I'm married, so here's the thing. I feel like if we're both going to consent to going outside of the marriage, it depends on when we make that decision, right? Years 1 through 3. why did we get married, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're already having that conversation, let me go, right? If we're, 10 to 15 years and we've had some rough patches and we need to do it because now we have all of these assets locked up together, right? These children, and the confines of marriage have made leaving harder, then maybe we have that conversation. But I also think in just dating relationships, right? Like, you don't have to stay, right? So if you have to cheat to stay with your boyfriend, then don't have a boyfriend, right? So I think this is like an interesting way that we're seeing these ideologies, right, of monogamy, but also self-interest, like intersect, because you don't
Right.
have to be in a relationship.
And the last thing I want to do, especially at this point in society, we're doing very well of not defining other people's relationships as wrong. At least I don't want to go look at people who are like, let's not be monogamous. Let's live together. We love each other. We're going to have like whatever on the side. And we agree that if we don't know about it, it's fine. Or we agree that if we both know about it, then it's fine. Like, go do it. That's fine. That's great. So I read these and I say, if people 65 and over are fine, like not cheating on each other, great. Let them be that way. I'm not going to say that they're better or worse than the people 18 to 29. As long as the people 18 to 29 promise me that they're happy and okay with it.
But the people over 65 were getting cheated on, for sure.
Yeah.
You just had to go bake a pie and swallow it, right? Like, you couldn't do anything about it. Now you have some kind of, say.
I would be very curious as to who initiates that conversation.
Yeah,
the
there's no
husband
gender
or the
breakdown
wife. You
here.
know what I mean? Because it's a completely different conversation for the husband. Like when he's come, I'm thinking it should be okay to cheat. You know what I mean? It's just
You've
such
got to
a
frame it
different thing.
differently.
You're like,
And then the other thing is, it's easier for a woman because she's going to get more opportunity. It's like you better be careful what you ask for, because
100%.
your wife is like, well, I could just go next door. You got some work to do. And so I don't know how many men, this is one of those things where it might sound like a good idea, but do you really want to test it?
Yeah, because when you broke up, when I was dating and I broke up with a girlfriend, I was like, oh yeah, here we go, right? And then 6 months later, like, any day now, right? And meanwhile, the next weekend, she's there with a guy. I'm like, oh, right, it's so much easier for her.
Is it really easier?
I don't know.
Yes.
Good answer. That was like on cue and everything.
It may be more difficult for her to find the guy she wants.
Right.
But
Discretion.
to find just a guy to hook up with, that's easier.
Right.
Oh, that feels not right.
Not right? Well,
No.
good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know anything.
That's the truest thing that's ever been said on the show.
I love the beginning of the conversation's got to be great. I want people in the comment section to tell us like how you would bring this up, like the words you would use, because I have a feeling it's the kind of conversation that like you just look at the other person's eyes and it gives away the entire conversation. Like when they're like, okay, hear me out. And then it's just like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Okay. Or you bring it up and you're like, hey, hon, I got this theory about the lions and stuff, and so I think maybe we should do this. And she's like, yes. You're like, oh, wait.
You guys are too forward.
I was working on a cruise ship where I guess this couple thought this was going to be a good idea. I don't know if they were in an open relationship, but on the ship they were. She hooked up with so many guys, he left the cruise and flew home. He was so mad.
How did he get out? How did he get out of the ocean?
So mad that he couldn't have, because she was like, every night she'd be at the bar and like, okay, it's your turn, let's go. And they thought that they had lost him on the ship, and because they do that regular attendance or however they thought he had fallen overboard or something. No, he got off and flew home. He was tired of his.
He was drowning, for sure.
Yeah, thought it was a good idea.
You gotta bring it up in way more subtle ways. Like, what do you think about Mark? As a what? Then you kind of get into it.
What I love is that every one of us had a theory on it.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, okay, now the asset situation is going to be worked out.
Really
okay?
focused.
And Alonzo's like, not if you're on a ship.
No,
Ship is the worst place.
no, I don't. I would never bring it up. But I'm single. I've never been married, so I can't say. But I don't think that it's a good idea.
Please forgive me if I'm being personal, but tell me about your sex life.
Well, actually, sometimes we do in the post games if you're a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.